house keep us reckoning. Chapter E. The whisper of the waves. The North Sea's wind carried salt and regret, slamming against the weathered spoon of Black Cliff Lighthouse with a force that shook the very foundation of the structure. Elias stood at the edge of the lantern platform, his calloused hand gripping the iron railing so tight his knuckles whitened, as if he could anchor himself to the world by sheer will alone. Below, the waves churned like a beast awakened from a long slumber, foaming white as they crashed against the jagged rocks that jutted from the sea like broken teeth rocks that had claimed so much over the years. Ships with their cargoes of hope, lives cut short by the sea's fury, and the better part of his own soul, which had been eroded by guilt and loneliness over 2 long decades. He was 62, his face a map of the life he had lived, deep creases etched by the unrelenting wind and the weight of a secret that had festered like a wound, his hair a wild mane of gray that matched the storm clouds gathering on the horizon, heavy and foreboding. For 20 years he had tended this lighthouse, a self-imposed exile from the world he'd once lantern above him, its lens polished to a blinding sheen by his own hands each morning, cast a steady beam into the darkness, a silent apology to the sea for the mistake that had haunted him since that fateful night, a night that had stolen everything he held dear. The bell tolled once, deep and resonant, echoing over the water like a funeral knell. It was a sound Elias knew well, one that marked the hour. Yes, but also the weight of time, each chime a reminder of the years he had lost, the moments he would never get back. 20 years. 2 decades of watching the tides rise and fall with monotonous regularity, of listening to the seagulls cry overhead as they circled the lighthouse, their calls a mournful counterpoint to his own silence, of reliving that night in his dreams until the lines between memory and reality blurred into a haze of guilt and grief. He turned from the railing, his boots scuffing the wooden planks of the platform, which were worn smooth by years of his footsteps. The lantern room was warm, a stark contrast to the bitter cold outside, the air thick with the smell of oil and dust, and the faint, lingering scent of the lavender soap his wife, Clara, had had once used. A single oil lamp flickered on a small table in the corner, casting golden light over the worn leather journal that lay open beside it, its pages yellowed with age. Elias picked it up, his fingers brushing the pages filled with his cramped handwriting notes on the weather, the tides, the comings and goings of the sea, the number of ships he had guided safely to harbor. But between the lines, hidden in the margins, were the words he dared not speak aloud, words that had become a litany of despair. I'm sorry. I should have been there. It was my fault. The door to the lantern room creaked open, its hinges screaming in protest against the wind, and a gust swept in, carrying with it the faint sound of a boat's horn, distant but distinct, cutting through the howl of the gale. Elias looked up, his eyes narrowing against the light from the lantern, his vision blurred by the salt that clung to his cheeks. In the distance, a small fishing boat was making its way toward the harbor, its sails taut against the wind, fighting to stay on course. He watched it for a moment, his heart aching for the life he'd left behind, the life of a fisherman, of a husband, of a father Lars, their nets heavy with cod and herring, their laughter echoing over the water as they dreamed of the future. Once he had been like those fishermen rising before dawn to prepare their boat, the salt air stinging his cheeks as he untied the ropes, the sound of the waves lapping against the hull, a familiar lullaby. He and Lars had been inseparable, bound by blood and a shared love of the sea. Their dreams intertwined like the nets they cast each day. They had laughed together, argued together, dreamed of a future where they would own their own boat, where their children would grow up by the sea, learning its ways and its wonders. But that future had been shattered on a night like this, stormy, unforgiving, and cruel, a night that had taken Lars from him and had driven him into the solitude of the lighthouse, where he had remained ever since. Elias closed the journal, his hands trembling slightly, the leather cover rough against his palms. He walked to the lens, adjusting the mechanism with practiced hands to ensure the beam stayed true, its light cutting through the darkness like a knife. The light was a beacon of hope for any sailor lost at sea, a guiding hand leading them to safety. But Elias. It was a reminder of his failure, a failure that had cost him everything, a failure that he relived every time he looked out at the sea. As the wind howled outside, its force rattling the windows of the lantern room, he thought of Clara, his wife, and of little Anna, their daughter, who had been just 3 years old when he had left. He thought of the way Clara's hair had shone in the sunlight, a cascade of chestnut waves that he had loved to run his fingers through, of the sound of her laughter, warm and melodious, that had filled their small cottage with joy. He thought of Anna, her chubby cheeks and bright eyes, the way she had clung to his leg before he had set out that fateful day, begging him to stay, to play with her just a little longer. He thought of the last time he'd seen them, standing on the shore, waving goodbye as he set out with Lars on that trip, a trip that would change everything. He had promised to come back, to bring them home a boat full of fish, to tuck Anna into bed that night, to hold Clara in his arms and tell her he loved her. But he hadn't kept that promise. He had never come back, not until now. The boat's horn sounded again, closer this time, its echo bouncing off the cliffs that surround is straining against the darkness, and saw that the fishing boat had reached the harbor, its hull bobbing gently in the water as the fisherman tied it to the dock. A figure stepped onto the dock, a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, a coat pulled tight against the wind, her shoulders hunched against the cold. There was something familiar about her, something in the way she moved, in the shape of her jaw, in the glint of her eyes, that made his heart skip a beat. He leaned forward, squinting, and for a moment he thought he saw an all grown up standing there, waiting for him, just as she had waited all those years ago. But it was impossible. Anna would be 23 now, a woman with a life of her own, a life that had been lived without him. She would have forgotten him, hated him even, for abandoning her and her mother, for choosing the solitude of the lighthouse over the family that had loved him. Elias turned away, his throat tight with emotion, a lump forming that he could not swallow. He couldn't face her, not now, not after all these years. He was a broken man, a ghost haunting the lighthouse, a man who did not deserve to be part of her life, not after the pain he had caused. He deserved to be alone, to suffer in silence, just as he had for the past 20 years. The wind died down for a moment, as if the sea itself was holding its breath, and the waves calmed, their fury subsiding into a gentle murmur. Elias closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry tears that had been bottled up for 2 decades. Tears of grief, of guilt, of regret. The tears streamed down his face, mixing with the salt from the wind, stinging his cheeks as they fell. He whispered Clara's name, Anna's name, Lars's name, over and over, as if they could hear him over the waves, as if his words could somehow reach them in the afterlife. He knew he would never be forgiven, not by them, not by himself, but he also knew that he couldn't go on like this, not forever. The weight of his guilt was becoming too heavy to bear, and he knew that something had to change. When he opened his eyes again, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The darkness retreating before the light. The lantern's beam faded into the light of day, its purpose temporarily fulfilled. and the sea sparkled like glass, the waves glinting in the morning sun. Elias took a deep breath, the salt air filling his lungs, sharp and invigorating, and he knew that something had to change. He couldn't stay in this lighthouse forever, trapped by his guilt, a prisoner of his own mistakes. He had to face his past, to seek forgiveness, even if it was too late, even if the only forgiveness he could find was his own. He picked up his journal again, flipping to a blank page, the paper crisp and unblemished. He dipped his pen in ink, the black liquid pooling at the tip, and for the first time in years, he wrote words that were not filled with regret, but with hope, words that felt like a weight lifting from his shoulders. Today I will go home. The words were simple, but they held a power he had not felt in decades, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find redemption, that he could finally let go of the guilt that had consumed him for so long. Chapter R: The Harbor's Secret. The walk from the lighthouse to the harbor was longer than Elias remembered, each step feeling like a journey into the past, a journey he had been dreading for 20 years. footsteps of villagers and fishermen alike was now overgrown with weeds. Their green tendrils tied around the rocks, the stones slippery with moss that had accumulated over the years. He walked slowly, his legs aching from years of climbing the lighthouse stairs, his joints stiff with age and disuse, his mind racing with thoughts of what he would find when he reached the village of the faces, he would see of the judgments he would face, of the daughter who might not even recognize him. Black Cliff Village was a small, quiet place nestled between the sea and the rolling green hills that stretched into the distance, a place where everyone knew everyone else's business, where secrets were hard to keep, and where the past lingered like the salt in the air. It had changed little in 20 years, same whitewashed cottages with thatched roofs, their walls adorned with flower boxes filled with vibrant blooms in the summer, same fishing nets strung between posts along the harbor, their ropes frayed with age, same smell of salt and fresh fish hanging in the air, a scent that was both familiar and comforting, yet painful at the same time. But to Elias, it felt like a foreign land, a place he no outsider, a ghost from the past. As he walked through the village square, a small open space surrounded by a few shops, a general store, a bakery, a pub, and the village church. He felt the eyes of the villagers on him, their gazes heavy with curiosity, judgment, and even a hint of fear. They recognized him. Of course, everyone knew the lighthouse keeper who had disappeared after the storm, the one who had left his wife and young daughter behind, the one who had been presumed dead by many, only to be discovered years later, living alone in the lighthouse, a hermit who never ventured into the village. Some nodded at him, their expressions neutral, their lips pressed into tight lines, as if they didn't know what to say, while others turned away, their faces filled with judgment, their whispers carried on the wind, too quiet to hear but loud enough to feel. Elias kept his head down, his hands in the pockets of his worn coat, his shoulders hunched as he made his way toward the harbor, the sound of his boots crunching on the gravel path, the only sound he could hear over the beating of his heart. The harbor was bustling with activity, a hive of life that stood in stark contrast to the lonely ashes, their voices loud and cheerful as they joked and laughed, their hands stained with fish blood, their nets heavy with cod and herring. Women stood on the docks, their baskets in hand, waiting to buy fresh fish for their families, their children running around, chasing each other, their laughter echoing over the water, a sound that made Elias's heart ache for the daughter he had missed growing up. Elias spotted the young woman from earlier, standing at the edge of the dock, talking to an old fisherman, her hands gesturing as she spoke, a faint smile playing on her lips. She was even more beautiful up close, with high cheekbones, dark eyes that sparkled like the sea, and a smile that lit up her face, a smile that was identical to Clara's. There was no mistaking it. She was Anna, his daughter. She had Clara's eyes, warm and kind, his own jawline, strong and defined, and the same laugh that had once filled their home with joy, a laugh he had not heard in 20 years. He felt a surge of emotion, a mix of joy and sorrow, of hope and fear, as he watched her, his heart racing so fast he thought it might burst out of his chest. His heart raced, and he felt a lump in his to run to her, to wrap her in his arms, to tell her how sorry he was, how much he had missed her, how he had thought of her every day for the past 20 years. But he couldn't. He was too scared, too ashamed. What would he say to her? How could he explain why he had left her? Why he had chosen the lighthouse over his own family? How could he tell her that he had been too cowardly to face the pain of his mistake, too consumed by guilt to be the father she deserved? He didn't have the words, and even if he did, he didn't know if she would listen. The old fisherman walked away, his steps slow and unsteady, and Anna turned, her eyes scanning the harbor as if she was looking for someone. For a moment, her gaze met Elias's, and he froze, his body going rigid, his breath catching in his throat. She frowned, her eyebrows furrowed, as if trying to place him, as if his face was familiar, but she couldn't quite put a name to it. Then her eyes widened in recognition, the color draining from her face, her smile fading completely, replaced by a look of shock, of pain, of anger. Elias knew that she had remembered him, that she knew who he was, and in that moment he wished he could disappear, wished he had never left the lighthouse. He took a step forward, his mouth opening to speak, to say something, anything, to explain, but Anna turned and walked away, her shoulders hunched, her head down, as if she couldn't bear to look at him any longer. Elias stopped, his heart breaking into a million pieces, the pain so intense he could barely stand. He had expected this, of course, hatred, anger, indifference, but it spilled out more than he could have imagined. He stood there, watching her walk toward a small cottage on the edge of the village, its door painted a bright red, a color that reminded him of the roses Clara used to grow in their garden, and he knew that he had to try again. He couldn't give up, not now, not after coming this far. He owed it to Clara, to Anna, and to himself to try to make things right. He walked over to the old fisherman who was mending a net, his gnarled hands moving slowly, his fingers deftly tying knots in the frayed ropes. The fisherman looked up, his eyes narrowing when he saw Elias, his expression hardening, as if he was not pleased to see him. was Thomas, an old friend of his and Lars's, a man who had been fishing the North Sea for as long as Elias could remember, a man who had always been honest, even when the truth was painful. Elias was, Thomas said, his voice gruff, his tone laced with surprise and something else, maybe anger, maybe sadness. I never thought I'd see you back here. Not after all these years. Hello, Thomas, Elias said, his voice hoarse, his throat dry, as if he hadn't spoken to anyone in years. It's been a long time. Too long. Thomas nodded, continuing to mend his net, his fingers never stopping, as if he was trying to avoid looking at Elias. 20 years. You've been up there in that lighthouse all this time. Alone. Yes, Elias said, his voice barely above a whisper. I needed to be alone. To atone for what I did. For Lars. Thomas coughed, putting down his net for a moment, his eyes fixed on Elias, his expression a mix of anger I left him. I turned back and I left him to die. That's unforgivable. I should have died out there with him. It should have been me, not Lars. You didn't leave him to die, Thomas said, his voice firm, his hand resting on Elias's shoulder, a gesture of comfort that Elias hadn't felt in years. You went back to get help. You ran to the Coast Guard, begged them to go out to save him. By the time you came back with them, it was too late. But you tried. That's more than most people would do. Most people would have saved themselves and left others to fend for themselves. But not you, Elias. You tried to save him. That's all that matters. done all he could, but the guild was still there, heavy and oppressive. A weight that he couldn't seem to shake. What about Clara? Elias asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his heart pounding in his chest, dreading the answer. And how have they been? Are they okay? Thomas's expression darkened. His eyes filled with sadness, and he looked away as if I know this is hard. I know you loved her. We all did. But Clara would want you to be here, to be with Anna. She's all you have left. She's the only family you have now. Elias looked up, his eyes red and swollen. this was right. Maybe Anna didn't hate him. Maybe she was just out, just confused. Maybe he had a chance to make things right with her, to be the father she deserved, even after all these years. I need to talk to her to explain everything, to tell her how sorry I am, how much I miss her, how much I love her. I need to ask for her forgiveness. Go to her. Thomas said, nodding, his voice firm. She's in Clara's old cottage, the one with the red door on the edge of the village. She lives there eyes filled with anger and pain. They looked at Catilius to the core. What do you want? She asked, her voice sharp, her tone laced with bitterness, as if just see